Oh yeah, we're there. So I'm gonna set this right here. I want you to, don't worry, if you come in, because I know time's an issue. You literally can't sit here and watch clay dry sometimes, and that's actually like really not beneficial to utilizing your time well. But I will do things like, do you remember how I left that out after I threw it?
Yeah.
So I left everything I threw sitting on the shelf and just put plastic on the very top so the rim was blocked. And I left it from 8 p.m. till 11 a.m. the next day, and it was like leather hard, a little stiffer than I wanted to. That's fine. I put some damp paper towel on it because it hadn't gone too far. So that kind of like fine tuning and getting things just the way you need them to be, and adjusting either through using damp paper towels or heat guns. That really helps kind of utilize your time well. Because if I had thrown these at 8 p.m. the night before, wrapped them completely, come in the morning, they would have been too wet to work with, right? Do I have an option if I need them stiffer?
Yeah.
Heat gun, right? So utilize your resources. I don't love using a heat gun unless I really, really have to. But if I had kind of played it another way, wrapped everything I made, I didn't want to wrap it right after I made it, because every time I wrap something I've just made in plastic, I end up smushing it and throwing it off center, which negates the whole point of working on the wheel. So I prefer to leave it out overnight, put it in kind of a safe situation where my rim is blocked by plastic, and come in the morning, and if it's got a nibble too far, put some paper towel on it and leave it for a little bit, right? So you can use those techniques. Remember, anytime your object is sitting on something porous, that porous thing will pull water out of it, right? So I was working on my own work the other day, and the plates that I was making have to be really stiff when I'm trimming them. Rims were set up. I wanted the bottoms a little more dry because that's where I was going to trim. So I left them covered on porous wood for several hours. And that got them exactly where they needed to be. So you can use all of those techniques to get things right where you want to be when you're not here, which is ideal, right? To maximize your time. Okay. So, I'm going to turn my wheel on. We're going to see if we can throw this. And Victoria asked the question, is that safe? Is it going to come loose? The answer is maybe. It might pop off when I'm really jamming on it, so I'm just going to kind of watch that. I also really don't want here super wet, because my danger zone of something collapsing is going to be like right in this region, right? So I just put water on it because I've got to get it pretty darn wet to throw with. And then I went and picked up the water with my metal rib, so I'm not accidentally creating like a soft spot right there.
To be extra cautious, would it be a good idea to add lugs to the bottom?
You know, I think lugs help sometimes, but with this big of an object, there's no lug that's really going to hold it on, right? So if I had like lugs down here, because this is rather tall, it's going to tip over, right? So I'm just going to go for it.
Okay.
So my hand can't fit in there yet. I'm going to slowly put my hand down in there because I need a hand on the inside, right? So whatever shape I'm going to throw, I've got to get my hand in there. You saw me put some water on the inside. I know I have water on the interior bottom of that pot. So I'm going to have to grab that out with a sponge on a stick, right? And then I just really want to feel this out before I start throwing. And just see like where is it stiff, where is it not? And I want to kind of bring this form out again. And then I'm going to add another piece onto it, okay? Which is fine, right? I want to think about the thickness I have. If I try to go like this wide, I'm going to be in trouble. I don't have enough clay to really get me out that wide. So you need to have enough of a chunk of clay on here to get you to where you need to go, right? If I wanted to just extend that neck up, and kind of bring it up further and bring my neck up to here, I have enough clay to do that. But what I think I'll do is I'll just kind of slowly build onto this. And we'll just keep adding onto it. So I want to build like the next bubble I'm thinking of. And I'm going to wet that part of my hand. because it is a little bit off center because of the nature of this technique, I'm gonna make sure my arms are really secure, and I'm gonna press kind of finger to finger and center it out first. My sponge has some give, so it may not be that helpful. And I'm gonna feel this out. Where is it thick, where is it thin? I don't really wanna jam too hard right here because I don't have as much clay as I would like. So right now I'm just kind of running finger to finger. It could be knuckle to finger, lining those up. And I'm just gonna try to quiet this down a little bit by doing that. So I'm not really pulling as much as just lining my fingers up and quieting this down. So my exterior hand is pressing into my interior hand and vice versa. And that clay is moving up a little bit, but I'm just taking this nice and slow. And this is more about getting the center back than making the shape, okay? The other thing I'm gonna be keeping an eye on is I know I can cut the very tippy top of my clay off, right? I'm gonna go down and get that water, because I can. I deconstructed my sponge on a stick from last class. I think I borrowed a hair tie from you. I never have rubber bands in a clay studio. I don't know why that is. They come in handy. So now I'm gonna be thinking about the shape a little bit. I'm gonna work into my rib. I love working with a rib. That gives me kind of a better control of the silhouette. It also adds a little compression to the clay. Oops, I just dug that. I'll fix it.
Your rib is a little tilted. Is it on the edge or a little
Yeah.
on the side?
So whenever I'm working with my rib, I can get a nice circular shape, because really what I'm doing is this. And if I hold my rib at a 90-degree angle to my piece, I'm gonna remove clay. If it's tipped like this, it's really just there for a hard edge that I'm shaping with, but I'm gonna dig kind of another part of the pot like I did down here by accident. So when I use a wooden rib, I tend to flip it at a diagonal so that my hand can hit this part of it, and then it's moving with the clay, right? So it's kicked like this and like this, so that I'm not ripping clay off, but I can do this, the whole shape, because I want something round. This does not mean you can get, like, just because it's straight doesn't mean it's gonna make something that's straight. If you watch, my rib's gonna be following my finger and it's gonna be doing this. I love using that wooden rib whenever I'm bellying out because it's really stiff. If I have a soft rib with give, it always goes out of center, right? Because you need something stiff on the outside. That's why like a sponge in your outside hand when you're bellying isn't always great, because that sponge has give, and that will be kind of what puts the wobble in your piece too. So you even saw me switch from my finger tip to my knuckle at one point. So my knuckle's harder than that squishy fingertip. And then whatever I'm doing, my arms are really tucked into my body anytime they can be, right? And then my hands, I'm gonna move slow up the form, letting it make lots of rotations. That's gonna keep it even, because the bottom part of this is already looking a lot more even than the top, right? And if I'm not hitting the rib on the edge, I'm gonna be in trouble. If I'm pressing here, my whole pot's gonna start doing this. So take your time, make sure you have those things lined up. Because I'm really just taking one tiny portion of that rib, and that's what my inside hand is pushing into. And again, I know I can cut off the tippy top, so I'm not panicking. It's really rare that whenever you use these kind of compound form techniques, you're gonna have like a perfect centered piece. It's really tough to do that because you're just using these kind of methods of adding clay and adding clay. Things have shrunk, things have not been cut off the wheel, so they're not gonna be perfect. But if you look at this while it's not spinning, it looks okay, right? So let yourself kind of work through that imperfection. If you are getting some wiggle on your piece, be calm, work your fingers up nice and slow. It's gonna be okay. You'll get there. So now I'm just gonna shape this a little bit because I don't really want this any thinner. I'm also gonna go back down here and get my boo-boo where I dug with my rib by accident. My metal rib is a good shaping tool also. It just doesn't have as much rigidity as that wooden rib, so I tend to like to use that first and then go in with my wooden rib. I can feel my skin catching on the inside of that piece. So I'm gonna wet that down a little bit. Because if my wrist catches up here, it'll kind of pull that long, tall piece off center.
When you're making it that big, would it be better to stand up or just sit down and try to do it?
You know, it's personal comfort. You can stand up if it feels better. The other thing I like about that metal rib, if you have the curve you want and you put it to your piece like I just did, and keep it there nice and stable, it's gonna calm your piece down too, right? And then I kind of want to think, like, what's that next component I'm going to add, and how am I going to add it?
How thick is this piece now in terms of where it used to be and now where it is?
So, these walls are probably about like this thick, right?
Okay.
Bigger the object, thicker the walls. I don't want something super thin for an object this size. That's going to be in trouble. It's a little bit thicker right here because it's kind of collared in, but that's kind of one of those like problematic points, so it's okay. I would highly recommend when you're beginning working on the wheel, do not distract yourself with making thin, right, when you're starting. That's gonna come with time, and a lot of times it's the end part of the processes where you're gonna be able to kind of deal with that thinness. The last project when we trimmed, I started with a massive amount of clay and trimmed down to a nice, you know, delicate little top. What's important is the interior shape, because that's going to determine what your outside can be. And then if you have the opportunity to trim, you can adjust your thinness then too. If you're trying to throw to make it thin, to throw thin, to make thin ceramic objects, you're going to have a lot of failure. And I also think that's an unrealistic expectation of handmade ceramics. We're all used to manufactured wares that come out of our kitchen cupboards, right? Those are made in totally different processes, and it's not fair to have that expectation for a wheel-made object. So I'm just gonna quiet this down and get my curve in, and then I'm gonna be done. If I'm gonna add a component and pop it on there, I know I'm gonna wanna put a bevel at the top of this, because that really helps for that fit. If I'm gonna add a piece of clay and continue to throw, I really don't need that bevel on top. It can be a flat top, because I'm just going to add a ring of a cylinder onto it and keep throwing. So I want to kind of think about what I'm going to do next. I'm going to get the final comb. I'm probably going to trim just a nibble off the tippy top. And I'm just using that rib and the wheel moving and trying to get it as centered as I can. And again, I'm not super worried about total perfection here, because it's not gonna be easy to get that. The more you practice these techniques, the better you'll be. The next time I did this, I'd do a better job, right? Because I haven't done this in a minute. And always with a new form, it takes me just a minute to figure it out. First of all, I gotta see what it looks like.
You're
I
shielding
think
the
I'm gonna
water.
cut it down low, and I'm gonna add a cylinder and keep throwing it. Because I want it to kind of go, it's gonna taper in more here, and I want it to go out, and then in again. So I'm actually gonna maybe collar that in a nibble, and then cut off the top.
What part were you shielding with your hand?
The tippy top,
Just the very top?
yeah, like here, just because I wanted to
Okay.
see what it looked like without it.
Okay.
I want that to move in just a little bit more. So I'm just collaring it in. And then I'm gonna cut the tippy top off. And get that water out of there before I do. So sometimes when I collar, I'll kind of do this. Other times I'm going to be pushing with one hand and driving it in. But I think that's more what I was thinking. It's really tough to see shape when you're sitting above it on the wheel like this. You have to get off the wheel and look at it to see what you have going. You have to look at it from afar. That's better. All right, I'm just gonna slice the top even. We'll call it good for now. Oh, I don't know where the stuff goes. So I don't know where my needle tool went, so I just did that with a wooden rib. Not ideal. I made it work though. Looks good. So now I'm just gonna get this all set. And I need to let this stiffen up, right? But the bottom I really don't want any stiffer. That's about right. I also am gonna choose not to take this off the wheel yet. But I want this to be able to take another component going onto it. So now when I wrap this, I'm gonna wrap the bottom and not the new softer clay, okay? Because if I leave this just sitting out as is, this will start to stiffen, which is great. That's gonna go way too dry. So I'm gonna leave only that fresh, soft clay exposed and just leave it sitting out.